So, being an aspiring creative writer, I feel discussing my three favorite books should be at the top of the list of videos I need to make, so let's get to it. I already did my three favorite movies. I'm going to use a similar criteria. I'm not going to go decade by decade. I'm just going to kind of go backwards chronologically, so I'll start at the most recent book on my list and then work my way up to the most the most piece of classic literature I have on my list. And it's really a kind of one very modern piece of fiction and then one kind of piece of contemporary classic fiction, if you will, and then a very well-known and well-regarded, literary masterpiece that I have as the last spot on my list. I also want to get to a couple honorable mentions. First of all, I have a couple comic series that I don't really think have a place on this list, but I don't know, comics are one of those things. I mean, I had my graphic novel phase for a while in high school, but I could maybe make a list of my favorite comic books, but it would by no means be a complete list because I'm really not all that familiar with the genre. But two of them I want to point out. First of all, the Scott Pilgrim series. For one, just because of its character development. I mean, I think the movie did a decent job squeezing 6 books into one movie, but there's a lot going on in the books. There's a lot of subtleties to the relationships of the characters. Obviously, a ton of in-jokes, a ton of references, and I don't know, just the experience of reading those books one after another. I mean, I'm sure it must even be better if you haven't seen the movie and you go in reading those books, which unfortunately I didn't get the chance to. But still, I feel like it's honestly a really moving story overall, and you really get a sense of all the characters and their relationships and inner dynamics, and that's really something I respond to as a writer myself. And that's a motif I'll probably keep going back to in this episode, is things that I respond to as a writer myself, and things that I, pull from and am inspired by and, want to emulate, if you will. Oh boy, the other comic that I want to mention, I don't want to spend too long on these honorable mentions, but this bad boy right here. Oh yeah. The complete Calvin and Hobbes. That right there is one of my favorite Christmas presents I've ever received. Honestly, I don't really look at it all that much, but it's all there, every single last one of Bill Watterson's, dare I say, beautiful comics. I mean, if you don't know about Calvin and Hobbes, just look it up. It's just one of the best representations of childhood that there's ever been in any form of fiction, and I'll just leave it at that. That's all I'll say about Calvin and Hobbes. It's just a perfect depiction of childhood. Childhood. If you know me, you know that I'm all about childhood. I used to joke sometimes that my writing was almost like I was whoring out my childhood, where it's like, and I kind of do to a certain extent. I kind of just take, sentimental elements, and I don't know, that is kind of my style. I do like to go back to my childhood a lot with my writing and kind of see where I can take it. But speaking of that, a couple books I read in high school that actually have to do with child psychology, if you will, are Lord of the Flies and Catcher in the Rye. Honestly, not going to talk about them at all, just want to say that I really did appreciate them. I think I have sort of an addiction to anything with an island theme. Those who know me know I'm in love with the Tiki Room at Disneyland. Survivor, I have my Survivor addiction, and Lord of the Flies goes right along with it. And I like Lord of the Flies for the same reason I like Survivor, is that it's just sheer human drama. And The Walking Dead, for that matter, I guess, but The Walking Dead doesn't do that nearly as well as Survivor or The Lord of the Flies does. Catcher in the Rye, don't need to say much about it. I think it's a little bit oversaturated, but at the same time, there's parts of that book that definitely moved me, especially the second to last, the ending to the second to last chapter with Holden and his sister on the carousel. If you know what I'm talking about, that moment just really got to me. Not quite enough to get it on the list. Bridge to Terabithia, definitely, tragic sort of tearjerker, but at the same time had a very good sense of the imagination and what it's like to be a kid and the confusion of going into, the adult world and facing it for the first time. And Bridge to Terabithia is great. I remember reading it in 5th grade and just it leaving an impact on me. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, two very different, but at the same time very similar pieces of gonzo journalism, if you will, if you consider Kool-Aid gonzo journalism. I think Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is definitely the stronger of the two, but I think the two really do complement each other. I'm not going to go on too much about them. I want to get to my 3 main ones. The first one is a book by a well-established Japanese author, although honestly, this is the first book I've actually read by him. I need to check out more of him. His name's Haruki Murakami. I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. The book I'm talking about is Kafka on the Shore. I just read this a year ago, and it, mind pretty much blown. This is it's so cinematic, so theatrical, and it's when you're reading it, you can just picture it as a movie. The characters leap off the screen. They're very vivid, very, the descriptions, you have one character who kind of left an impression on me. He's just, I don't know, he's not one of the more important characters of the plot, but he's basically someone who follows around this old man who's central to the story. And he wears this red Chinese dragon baseball cap. And, I don't know, certain things that I aspire to as a writer, little tiny character details that like that just define the character for the reader. Kafka on the Shore is just loaded with them. It's somewhat based on the artist Kafka. Honestly, I really need to do more research on him. There's an episode of my favorite TV show, or one of my favorite TV shows, Breaking Bad, called Kafkaesque. I believe Kafkaesque is just a world where everything is just not quite what it appears to be. Everything's off. Kafka on the Shore does this greatly. It's a lot of stuff going on here. I mean, it's really out there. It's not for everyone. It's definitely not for everyone, but I think it's one of those things where it doesn't really provide answers. It really leaves it ambiguous. I don't know. I mean, I don't even know how to get into describing the plot because it's just so crazy. I mean, in essence, it's kind of like a modern-day Catcher in the Rye, where you have this Japanese kid and he just calls himself Kafka the whole book. You don't know his real name, but he's a runaway. He's trying to escape some crazy prophecy that he's going to murder his father, and the whole book kind of revolves around that. It's just crazy, and there's just crazy out there imagery, like fish falling from the sky, and just all kinds of good surrealism, and I think the surrealism in this book is actually handled really well. You know what? I think I'm going to make a part 2 of this video, and I think I'm going to talk about my other 2 favorite books, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed part 1. Basically, I just don't want to ramble on for too long in these videos, so I'm just going to cut it off here. Part 2, I'll discuss my 2 other favorite books.